see the note. The meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. Okay, so I'll start. Welcome, everybody. It is Tuesday, May 12th. This is the regularly scheduled Warren Town Council meeting. We are live via Zoom. I will just give a few meeting notes before we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. This evening, it's important to remember that we will proceed with patience and give everybody time to say what they need to say, and that before we go on to the next. If there are any difficulties with the technology, we will have to pause so that that can be addressed, so that people who are watching via YouTube, the live stream, participating in Zoom, get everything all synced up. To all speakers, that's both council, presenters, and anybody who might speak from the public, please identify yourself, as some people are listening just to the audio, so they won't know who's speaking. I am Carrie Cronin, Warren Council President, so example one. When we do have a situation where a vote is required, we will do the roll call vote. And when there are council questions or comments, opportunities for those, we will do that as if we were in the council chamber. So I will start to my left as we are normally seated. And so for a roll call and comments, we'll start with Joe, then go to Brant, then go to my right to John, and then Steve, and then I will go last in that order. For anybody who is participating in the Zoom or who may be calling in for public comment, if you need to say something, please do use the raise hand feature. The council won't be using the traditional Zoom raise hand feature, but any other participants do need to use that. If you are participating by Zoom, that's in the participant little icon, and there's a raise hand feature. If you are phoning in, hit the star or asterisk and the number 9. That will get you in. I believe if there are any problems, is there a number or a way that a member of the public could communicate with either you, Kate, or you, Julie, or Jessica, or Haley for any ongoing issues?
I'm here if you have an issue.
But how would a person, if a member of the public is having an issue, what is the number that they should call if they're not able to get through?
I'm not sure I understand. If they can't bring up YouTube, or they can't dial in.
If they can't dial in.
I'm not sure. Let me ask Kate that question. 1 minute, please.
I'm here. I have my email open, so someone could always send me an email at kmisho@townofwarren-ri.gov. If they're actually on the Zoom call and they're having an issue hearing something, they can use the raise hand, and we can check in on that. Or if they've logged in somehow, they can use the chat. Or again, like I said, I have my email open right now, so if anyone sends me an email, I'll see it right away.
They can also use the YouTube chat.
There you go. Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure that everybody has every opportunity to participate. For those participating from the public, once you have been unmuted to ask your question or make your comment,
or again, like,
oops. Anyways, for a member of the public who is making a comment or asking a question, please identify yourself by name, spell your name, and then give your address. And also, if it's a complicated street name, ideally you're in Warren, and we will know what that is, but just be sure that it is very clear who you are by name and address before you speak, because that is all part of our public record. Am I forgetting anything here for pre-meeting notes? I think that's good. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. My flag is right here. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we can have a moment of silence, we lost Willie or William McDougall this past week. He was a former member of the town council. He served for 4 years. He was a member of our sewer commission for many years. He was a veteran of the Vietnam War fighting with the Navy. He was a member of Engine 1. So a moment of silence. Thank you. And as Councilman Kalenda also pointed out, this is National Police Week. So thank you especially to all of our police for protecting and serving. We have at the beginning of our meetings, we have an opportunity for public comment. As of today at 4, there were no members of the public with any questions or comments, so we can go right past that. And we will go right to our presentation. We have Wenley Ferguson and Pam Marchand from Save the Bay and Bristol County Water Authority to do a presentation for us this evening. Wenley, Pam, if you are ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, now that I'm unmuted, thank you very much for having us attend the meeting. I know it's a little difficult in this day and age. I've been through quite a few of these at this point. But with the agenda, we provided a couple of documents for you to review. One was an application that we sent in the spring for the Upper Kickemuit River Dam removal restoration, looking for matching funds from essentially the state through the CRMC. And that document gives a pretty good rundown about what we're looking to do with the 2 dams. We had spoken previously, probably a year or so ago, with the council about removing the Upper Kickemuit Dam. That dam was built in the 60s, actually after Hurricane Carol, to prevent salt water from moving further upstream, with the idea that it would protect some of the water supply in case of another hurricane. The lower dam on Child Street now does get overtopped during moon high tides, and salt water does go into the reservoir. So as of last year, we are no longer using the supply for a water supply or even for a backup emergency supply. Meanwhile, we had gotten cited back in around 2015 for the Upper Dam not being maintained.
We're having some technical difficulties. Let's take a pause, please.
As we figured we didn't need it, so.
She didn't hear you, Carrie.
Pam? Pam?
I hear you.
Okay, there were some technical
Okay
difficulties.
now?
I hear you now. We've lost your video, and there you are again, and your audio was cutting out. So maybe you want to take it back about 5 sentences.
Okay. Actually, the upper dam was built to prevent saltwater incursion into the upper area north of Schoolhouse Road as a backup supply in case of another storm like Carol. We didn't fully maintain that dam. It got overgrown. It's more of, it was built as a dike, actually. We didn't even consider it as a dam. Got cited by the DEM back in about 2015. So they wanted us to remove the brush, which we did do. And And then they started taking a closer look at it, and the dam design, not as a fully functional dam, it doesn't have a spillway, only has a low-level outlet. So they were looking for us to do more maintenance and perhaps even construction on the dam. So at that point, we said, well, we don't need it. Why shouldn't we investigate removing it? Which we proceeded to do. We worked with Wenley Ferguson from Save the Bay. She's been a huge support in this whole endeavor. We worked with the state officer of, I'm sorry, I just
Office
forgot,
of Dam Safety. The Office of Dam Safety.
well, the DM office of safety, but the state officer of resiliency.
Oh,
with
Shauna O'Rourke,
O'Rourke, and
the Chief Resilience Officer.
yes, and we and with the state DEM, the Save the Bay, and the CRMC, looking at what we needed to do to remove this dam. And what benefit, the major benefit, we also worked with of having the dam in place. Removing the dam helps alleviate that flooding. But the biggest issue is the fact that there are culverts under Schoolhouse Road which are undersized, and those needed to be replaced. And the bridge on Schoolhouse Road would need to be raised to be able to accommodate the higher culverts and volume. So fortunately, Kate worked with us with the DOT and impressed on them the need to get this done. It's an issue with the town to be able to have access through Schoolhouse Road during flooding and emergencies. So the DOT agreed to work with us. They are now in design for the culverts in the dam, and they are planning on construction beginning next year. At which time we have gone further with doing our engineering work on the upper dam. We've got about 60% design work done, and to go in and breach the dam. With the handouts, if you want to start with the last 3 pages, actually, if you have them available.
Can I stop?
The upper dam. It originally looked last 3 pages, one of those, because of the original stream flow.
Pam Marchand.
Hello.
Hi, your audio is breaking up pretty severely and it's hard to follow. Is there any way that Wenley can take over if her audio is better?
Yes.
Is that okay to ask?
Sure.
I will try to do so, and Pam, please chime in.
Yeah, your audio is much more clear, Wenley, and
see if I can try my type here.
So for the council people, the PowerPoint presentation or the slides that Pam shared with Kate to share with you last week, the last 3 slides go into the upper Kickemuit Reservoir. This was a presentation that was given by PAR Engineering to the Bristol County Water Authority Board back in January of this year. And it reiterates some of the information that Pam just shared, the upper Kickemuit Reservoir, the purpose of it. The second one on the RIDEM notice of violation talks about the violation that Pam mentioned, and that was the beginning of the discussion of whether or not Bristol County Water would continue to maintain this structure, or if they should consider removal of it, working with the Office of Dam Safety. And that is when they retained PAR Engineering, who did a feasibility study looking at removal, and then continued to do additional assessments looking at the hydrologic and hydraulic impacts of doing this work. What's interesting about the Upper Kickemuit River Dam, as you all know, Schoolhouse Road currently floods under existing conditions, and removing the dam will actually reduce some flooding of Schoolhouse Road on the east side of the road, east side of the impoundment, because the Upper Kickemuit River, that water backs up and it causes flooding of that eastern section of Schoolhouse Road. We know under certain conditions today, it does flood down directly downstream of the upper impoundment. And by removing the upper impoundment, the flooding directly downstream of Schoolhouse Road would increase. So a crucial part of this project was to get the Department of Transportation to become a partner on this project. The Department of Transportation had repaving of Schoolhouse Road on their tip list for, I'm forgetting the date, maybe sometime in the next 4 to 5 years. And during the summer of 2018 and 2019, Bristol County Water, the town with Kate Michaud and Bob met, and the Chief Resilience Officer for the state, Sean O'Rourke, met with the Department of Transportation, and we discussed the importance of raising Schoolhouse Road to prevent current flooding as well as future flooding with the dam removal. And just as importantly, replacing those culverts that are currently, I believe one is functional, but are blocked underneath Schoolhouse Road. And this summer, our second meeting with the Department of Transportation, the director of the Department of Transportation committed to moving this project forward if Bristol County Water would approve funding of the entire project, the Upper Kickemuit River Dam project. And the board approved the funding in August of 2019. So that was definitely a good outcome, that with the removal of the Upper Kickemuit River Dam, we are going to be seeing in the improvement of reduced flooding of Schoolhouse Road, as well as increased stream continuity and fish passage underneath Schoolhouse Road through those culverts that will be properly sized. So Pam, I'm not sure if you're back on, but if you want to continue the presentation from the first few slides. Pam, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. Okay, I tried moving. Is this any better?
It does sound better, just initially, yes.
Okay. I guess we can try then.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, looking at the dam, well, I guess we're on the dam breach itself. This was following the natural contours of the previously existing stream. That was one of the pictures we had. It's actually on one of the slides towards the end, but that was designed as just a breach, and it'll follow the natural process. Okay, go to the next slide. Sediment management is going to be a big part of the setting up this breach. They don't want any sediment moving downstream into the reservoir. So there is a pond just below the dam, just north of Schoolhouse Road, and they will be setting up barriers inside that pond for silt and soil management, and they'll gradually increase the breach to larger and larger sizes. But, and the silt will be removed as it is accumulated as well. So it will not impact the reservoir itself. Okay, we can go to the next. This is just an overall view of the design concept with the Upper Kickemuit Dam is to the right. But what this showed is some of the testing and modeling that was done for precipitation events. The red line is actually the 100-year precipitation with the dam removed. The blue line is the 100-year precipitation with the dam in place. There's not a large difference except in a couple of locations where we would have had to do some remediation to prevent any additional flooding. And one is certainly on Serpentine Road and then down by the condos at the lower Kickemuit. But at this point, we started asking, well, what would be the benefits to actually removing both dams? If we removed the Child Street Dam, we would alleviate any flooding caused by the removal of the upper dam. And it would also provide a full fish passage going from the bay all the way up into the upper reaches of the Kickemuit watershed, which would also provide benefits. And this is Wenley can speak to, is creating saltwater marshland in the future with sea level rise, because that's becoming obviously, as you know, is a very large issue. So we started doing studies on removing the lower dam. We're partly through those studies. We haven't completed them yet, but we're finding that there's no reason that it wouldn't be feasible. It actually does help alleviate funding. The dam in the condition it's in now and the height of the dam does not prevent any flooding upstream. As we mentioned previously, we do get saltwater incursion over the dam during high tides. And there was a chart on one of the sheets too that showed some of the levels that were done by the National Atmospheric Administration that showed the high tide should be at about 4.6 feet. The dam, we're finding that it's actually 5.6 feet is from our recent measurements. So it's already, water levels already higher than what had been predicted. It should be during high tides. So it's actually looks like it would be a help to remove both the upper dam and the lower dam. We've been doing soil testing on the lower as well. We found a little bit of issue with some copper because we used copper sulfate for the algae in the reservoir for water quality. And what we're finding is there isn't much in anything that we do find will be removed. Again, the same as the upper dam, there would be a coffer dam put in, gradually breach the lower dam, remove soils as necessary. So what we've done recently is we applied for matching funds for construction work, both for the upper dam and the lower dam. You saw a preliminary application. We have since filed the full applications with the CRMC, and we're hoping to obtain some matching funds to go forward with the construction work. Okay, we can go to the next. And this just shows some of the modeling and for the different values for rainfall, at 50-year and 100-year. 500-year, we even was modeled to see what happens with the reservoir. There actually is, once the upper dam is removed and the lower dam, the effects are relatively minor. You can,
and just to add, this is the slide that shows the area east of Schoolhouse, east of the upper impoundment, that flooding will be reduced once the upper impoundment is removed, because it will lower that water table. You can see that a light blue hashed area in the upper right of that aerial image, and that currently floods. And by removing the impoundment, that section of Schoolhouse Road will no longer flood.
And these were just some of the costs. We had our engineer work up, so we had an idea where we're going. Obviously, we didn't plan on spending this kind of money on the dams, but as it got, the DEM was looking further and further into the maintenance of our dam and looking at its construction. The issues that they brought up were going to be very expensive. So we're looking at dam rehabilitation in the amount of $1.5 million, whereas removal would cost about the same, and you wouldn't have any further maintenance to do down the road. And the big issue with the removal is we can get construction assistance. There is grant funding available, and Wenley can go through that in a couple of minutes. But we've got did get matching funds to do the engineering work on both the upper and lower dam. And now we're applying for matching funds for the construction. Obviously, with dam rehabilitation, there is no funding available. That would all be on our ratepayers. So we're trying to do the best we can for the future and for the environment at this point as well.
And these were estimated costs for the upper dam removal.
That's correct. That's just one dam. The lower dam is actually somewhat similar, perhaps a little bit less expensive because of its circumstances. Well, you can go to the next slide. And the lower, of course, it's a little more substantial dam, but it's not very high. It's actually, as I said, regularly overtopped. It was built in the 1880s to provide the water supply for Bristol and Warren. And our treatment plant wasn't even built till 1908. But as water quality degraded over the years. So since we can no longer use the supply, and actually it's a very shallow reservoir. It looks large, but there's not very much water in it. Actually, there's more water in the Anawan Reservoir, about 3 times as much as there is actually in this reservoir. That's why it's subject to, because it's shallow, it's subject to water quality degradation. It's subject to algae in the summertime. You've gone by it in July and August, it's usually pea green, which is extremely difficult water to treat and not the best thing to start with. So it's always been listed by the state as not suitable for potable water, which is one reason we switched to Providence. But looking at the issues that could come up on the watershed, looking at possible flooding events, as I said, that was critical first to even consider removing the dam. That looks very feasible, actually could help improve the situation. Doing the sediments, which we've done all the preliminary work, we'll be doing more work, more intensive work on that. We also looked at all the private wells in the area, just to make sure that they would not be impacted. Based on the hydraulics, it does not appear they will be, but we will be identifying some of the wells that are nearby, and we will be testing those. And we will also test water quality before and after to make sure they're not being impacted by any salt water that is going to move a little further up the reservoir. If they are, we will be replacing those wells. The full amount of modeling and testing that would be required is actually more expensive at this point than replacing them. So we will be monitoring them, keep a close eye on them, and anything that needs to be replaced, we will replace. Okay, next slide. This is again more on the storm surge analysis. As you can see, the King high tide is exceeded every single year. It's an annual, but it's close to the atmospheric high tide. But the 2-year storm is actually exceeds it fairly often as well. As we mentioned before, we're already a foot over the predicted high tide levels for this dam. The hurricane of 1938 was 12.4 feet high. The dam is, oops, I did have that here. It's about 5.6. So that was considerably over the dam, so it provides no attenuation for storms at all. It was built, and actually then the 54 was also, that was Carol. was 12.7, and that's why the water company built the dam at the upper section. And just as you can see down below, the lower Kickemuit Dam, between the lower and the upper is actually the bushy hill marsh that actually floods into the lower Kickemuit. And that's where the lower dam actually ends up retaining some water coming in from the west side of the town. So in the modeling, it always comes out a little bit better if the lower dam is actually removed. Okay, next. And projected timeline. As I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you caught it, but the DEM is doing their work next year. So this year we will be finishing the design work and getting the permitting. Permitting does take almost a year, going through that process. And then we were looking to be ready to start construction in 2020. The DEM will do their construction in 21 and I'm sorry, in early 21, we'll start in the middle of 21. They said they promised they will be out of our way. Oops, I misspoke. We're going to be starting construction in 22. They're going from 21 into the beginning of 22. But we're timing it with them. We're working with them, working with the DOT, working with the DEM, and working with the CRMC and the state to make sure we have this all coordinated. Also, another issue is the fact that the Army Corps of Engineers is involved, and we just had a meeting with them. So we've been working also to make sure everything is done properly and that we don't get sidetracked on any issues we didn't think of. Again, the lower dam is looking at also some rehabilitation. It was built in the 1880s. And for the long term, the issue with the DEM is they've changed the regulations, and the dams are being held to a higher standard. So again, we're seeking help for funding for working with these dams. And Wenley, if you wanted to mention the environmental aspects.
Yeah, the slide before last just had some of the images that Pam alluded to. Those images, Bristol County Water staff took photos of the tide flowing in. You can see where the lower right photo, you're looking downstream. You can see kind of the orange vegetation along the edge of the ponded area. That is salt marsh vegetation, and the white water is salt water flowing into the lower impoundment during one of these larger king tides. We had a 5'8" tide last week during a king tide. So they happen multiple times a year now, and that shows how low and how vulnerable the lower Kickemuit River is. As well as there are issues with water quality, and due to the impoundment itself, it's warmer water and it's ideal conditions for algal blooms, like the photo in the upper left shows. So a component of this project, by removing both the upper and the lower, removing the lower will basically restore a tidal estuary in the area where the impoundment is today. And with future sea level rise projections, the lower and the upper, the wetlands along the upper Kickemuit Reservoir are where they project. These modeling efforts have projected future salt marsh to be able to exist with sea level rise. So not only will water quality, improved flushing, improved fish passage result from removing the dam today, but by removing these dams, it will provide an area for coastal habitats to migrate inland as sea levels rise. And the next couple slides just show a few of the projects where we have done similar projects. Nothing quite like the lower and the upper Kickemuit. We did do a dam removal down in Gooseneck Cove in Newport. We're partnering with NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's restoration staff. They just did a head of tide dam removal on the Weweantic River over in Wareham. And we're using that project as a model for this effort. Again, it's a dam right at the head of the tidal influence. So one of the things that, as Pam mentioned earlier, because there are habitat benefits and flood community resilience and reduction of community flooding, we've been able to apply for and receive funds on behalf of Bristol County Water from different pots, different funding sources. We received the engineering funding for both the upper and the lower Kickemuit River Dam from Coastal Resources Management Council's Habitat Restoration Fund. And we just applied for funding for construction from DEM's climate resilience bond funding. And those are the bond monies that we passed last year. This next slide shows, as I was mentioning, how low lying the watershed is. The arrow points to Schoolhouse Road. The light pink shows what a 1 foot coastal storm surge would be, and the darker pink shows what with 1 foot of sea level rise, and the darker pink areas with 3 feet of sea level rise. So this area is an area where coastal habitats will be migrating inland as sea levels rise, and it's an area for both habitat restoration as well as by removing the dams, reducing community vulnerability by reducing flooding of some low-lying infrastructure. These are the different funding sources we have applied to, almost all of them at this point. And we are going to continue to work with Bristol County Water and the town on applying for additional funds for the removal of both the upper and the lower Kickemuit River Dam. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, they just did a study of Narragansett Bay and its watershed and highlighted the Kickemuit dam removal projects as a pilot project as part of this Narragansett Bay resilience study. So it was one of 2 pilot projects or identified resiliency projects in that study. So it's received some federal attention as well. And I believe that is the last of the slides. So thank you for your attention and helping us get through the technical difficulties. I apologize.
Wenley, Joseph D. Pasquale.
Hi, Joe.
I'm anticipating a successful removal. Do you think that looking at the tidal flat between Child Street and the broken bridge, do you think that after this removal phase, there could be a remediation of the silt that's built up in there?
So downstream of the lower Kickemuit Dam.
Correct.
You know, that's a good question with regards to flush, if there would be any benefit from the flushing. The Kickemuit watershed is very, very small, as you are aware. And so it doesn't have significant flow. So I'm not exactly sure if there would be any benefit from removing the lower Kickemuit on that area.
See, one of my concerns is that low tide, there's going to be no pressure. So you're going to just have the smallest stream in the middle. Of of course, this is an uneducated view, but looking at it, it's just going to be a mud flap. So if we're ever going to have, I think, the migration and the positive flow of water at a gradual amount, that area between the Broken Bridge and Child Street should be looked at. I'm sure it will be, but I think to maybe start that discussion now, so you can attach some of the science that you may find from this project to giving us a positive step forward on the next, or, you know, equalizing and telling us that everything's fine. But I just want to stress that taking a look at that, in my opinion, the dam removal doesn't just end at the lower dam. That's all.
Well, thank you for that. And one of the components of the project will be monitoring. We're going to be working with Bristol County Water on doing some water quality monitoring this summer in the lower impoundment, and also doing upstream and downstream monitoring. So the challenge will be, you know, access, but at least if we can have transects across the impoundments today and downstream, so we can be comparing the tidal estuary in its condition today with the future tidal estuary once the dam is removed.
Yep. Thank you. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Grant, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I have just a general comment that, you know, for our constituents who are looking at this and maybe viewing it tonight, but have looked at this for a long time. I mean, there's always this argument that, you know, we should continue to keep this resource, but I don't agree with that, but that's one of the arguments that comes up often. And I think other people will say, well, why not just leave the dams, because you could save a lot of money. But this presentation obviously makes clear that just the dam rehabilitation will cost close to what the removal will cost. And in my opinion, from what is being presented here, the value of the dam removal is far outweighs trying to keep these dams. So that's just my general comment. I thank you for the thorough presentation.
Councilman Hecker, thank you for bringing up the public outreach as well. Bristol County Water established a steering committee a few years ago with the folks that we've mentioned. It's a smaller kind of a smaller group. Back in the fall, when the discussions at the feasibility study phase of looking at the lower Kickemuit River Dam was beginning to be assessed, Bristol County Water held a meeting of the steering committee and abutters of the lower Kickemuit River impoundment. And if you looked, actually, I don't know if it was in that timeline that PAR Engineering put together, but in all of the timelines that I've been writing in grants, our goal was, will be to have some type of public meeting in the next few months as the engineering plans are in this phase of gathering the data for the engineering. A challenge will be, this is a new world with Zoom, but that is our goal, to have another public meeting before the plans are submitted for permitting. And if there's a way that we can work with the town of Warren on doing so, Pam and I were just discussing getting information. Some of this information is on BCWA's website, but different ways we can communicate in this new world and work with you to get this information out, we would greatly appreciate.
Thank you for that, Ms. Ferguson. I think the more information that is available, the more transparency, the better, obviously, for the public. Thank you.
Councilman Hanley?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. This was a very informative meeting. I was one of those people that really didn't want to give up this resource. But at this point in time, all of our eggs are in one basket, Providence Reservoir. It would just cost too much to actually bring this back at this point after we've gone so far. I mean, and second of all, I believe this is just a presentation. The council itself has no authority whatsoever over this decision. This is all BCWA's decision, not ours. But I do want to thank you for the presentation, and hopefully the people are informed by this. Thanks.
Thank you. Obviously, we want to work with the town. It's a big part of the town, and we're hoping to open it for recreation in the future as well. So it will become an asset of the towns and down the road.
Councilman Kalenda.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, Steve Kalenda here. I do have just two quick questions. Pam, when you started off your presentation, you said the dam breach would go through the natural process. Could you just explain that for me, please, for some of the folks that may be watching, may not understand what exactly you meant by that?
Okay, sorry, it was a little bit cut up too. One of the pictures shows the original stream flow, and engineers were able to locate the stream bed in the upper portion of the north of the upper dam. And they pinpointed as to where that stream bed goes through the dam area. So what they're looking to do is to create the breach where the stream originally was located. And they're going to do it gradually, cutting it larger and larger over periods of time to allow it to essentially naturally restore itself and to capture any soils that might be washed down, with the idea of removing those soils until the breach is completed.
Thank you. Excellent explanation. And one final question before I turn it back over to the council president. You mentioned that your hope is to open this up for a natural resource. Is it the plan that this would be an area where they could go fishing?
Fishing and kayaking.
Fishing and kayaking? Excellent. Well, ladies, I wanted to thank you for your presentation. The numbers seem to make sense. Good luck moving forward, and sitting on the council, I look forward to seeing you come back before us.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and I will say again, thank you for the presentation. I was at that previous presentation that PAR did at BCWA when they were just talking about the removal of the upper dam, and it's nice to see how it's connected, or the connection made, and the whole project overview now with the lower Kickemuit Dam. It's good to hear about the benefits of the removal attached to grant money, and the fact that, you know, the rehab would be a much larger cost and ongoing costs for such a long time. It's good to understand better the environmental impacts of the removal, and how that whole area will just naturally fill back in. And that seems to make sense for us. At that meeting, however, there were a number of, it was a packed room, and there were a lot of people from the public with a lot of concerns about how this project will impact their private homes, and the mention of the wells. And you will in fact be testing those 22 wells, I believe you cited, ongoing, and being sure that those are still safe for the residents in the area, and then replacing them as needed.
We'll be retesting the ones that are closest to the water, and if they start showing up any issues, we would certainly go back further. But any ones that do show issues, yes, we will replace those.
Okay, that is good to know, because as much as this seems like the obvious direction to go in on for so many reasons, I know those who live closest to these projects have particular concerns about how it will impact their lives. And I love the idea that we may have a place to kayak and fish and enjoy the water sometime in the near future. So yes, looking forward to how this project develops and how we can work together.
Ms. Cronin, if I could.
Mhm.
I'd also like to point out to the public that this is not a unique situation at the Kickemuit, and that this has become the favor and the norm in the Northeast, and the success by removing these old earthen dams is there. This isn't something that we're just trying to do correctly. Is that not correct, Ms. Ferguson?
I agree with you 100%. I've been working on anadromous fish passage projects since the mid-90s, and going from no dam removals in the state to the number of dam removals that have occurred in Rhode Island and in the Narragansett Bay watershed for habitat restoration purposes for fish passage is significant, from the Patuxent River, head of tide, the Pawcatuck, the project I mentioned to you in Newport at Gooseneck Cove, which is more of a salt marsh restoration effort. And there's been significant work on the Taunton River as well. So there's a lot of knowledge, and Bristol County Water has secured PAR Engineering to do all of the assessments to date and the engineering, and they have a repertoire of dam removal projects that they have done. And as I mentioned, we're working with NOAA's Restoration Center, and they were actually written into this last grant that we just wrote as match, and their ecologist is now part of our team, helping us review the engineering plans and ensuring that we're doing our due diligence with regards to ensuring appropriate fish passage, not just for anadromous fish like river herring, but also for the coastal species as well. And looking, ensuring that we're addressing some of those concerns about sediment management. So I'm excited that he has committed to this project so formally.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you so much. If there are no further questions, are there any questions or comments from the public in the waiting room?
Terry, we have nothing over here.
All righty. Thank you. Wonderful. We will be moving. Next on the agenda, there is one position open still on the Tree Commission with no applicants. So if we could have a motion to continue to have that advertised on the town website for right now, I think that would make most sense.
I'll make a motion. We continue the application for the Tree Commission on the town website.
I'll second that.
All righty. Joe?
Aye.
Brant?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Next, we have acceptance of minutes, acceptance of the April 14, 2020 minutes. If those have been reviewed, do we have a motion to accept those minutes?
Make a motion to, whoops, sorry, Brent.
Councilman Heckert?
I do have one possible correction. Could I point it out?
Yes, please.
On page 5, under interviews, it states that I made the nomination for Chris Stanley for the Bristol County Water Authority. I believe it was Vice President.
It was myself, yes.
That made that nomination. So if that could be reflected, please.
We'll make that.
They can be accepted as amended.
And actually, if I may, Madam President.
Yep.
After I spoke to the solicitor, he actually, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, the vote for Mr. Stanley could actually be either 4-1 or 5-0, depending on how, if you wanted to do it over again. It's really not significant. I just had the conversation with the solicitor to ask him whether or not we should have took a regular roll call or just had the vote the way you did it. If that makes any sense to you. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter to me. I just was matter for clarification.
Okay.
I think the vote can stand as is.
Good enough. Thanks.
The nomination was approved with 3.
Is that it?
So-
Is that, I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second it.
Councilman DePasquale,
Aye.
Councilman Heckert,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
and Councilman Kalenda.
Aye.
I vote aye. Next, we have consent agenda. We have a P1 and a P2. For the purposes of those listening and watching, consent agenda with the asterisk, all items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the town council and we will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a council member or citizen, in which event the item will be withdrawn from the general order of business and considered in the normal sequence on the agenda. So are there any public or council reasons to pull either P1 or P2 for further discussion? Hearing none, do we have a motion to pass the consent agenda?
So
Make
moved.
a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilman DePasquale,
Aye.
Councilman Heckert,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Moving on, ordinance 101, chapter 7, article 2, section 7-45, adjustment of exemption revaluation year. This is the second reading. Chris Leadham, if you're on the line, if you just want to give for our audience a brief explanation one last time, if there are any questions.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this ordinance just allows us to go ahead and use that existing legislation that for the years during a reval, we're able to adjust or really maintain and use the same credits that we give for veterans exemptions, elderly exemptions, disability exemptions, without needing to go to the state every time we do a reval. So it just saves us some time, some effort.
Thank you. Do any members of the council have questions or comments on this second reading?
Well, again, just maybe we would like to have the viewing public realize that this is a benefit that they are entitled to. Some people get nervous when they hear the word tax or exemption. What we are exempting is a tax break back to the participant.
Thank you for that explanation. Do we have a motion to pass this this chapter 7, article 2, section 7-45?
I'll make a motion, we approve ordinance change chapter 7, article 11, section 7-45 as presented to the council.
Second.
And our vote, Councilman DePasquale,
Aye.
Councilman Heckert,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Motion passes. Next, we have correspondence. Again, this is correspondence. We do the same as petitions. These are asterisks. Is there anything on the correspondence list that any member of the council would like to pull for review or discussion? Hearing none, do we have a motion to pass correspondence?
Make a motion, we file correspondence.
I'll
Second.
second that motion.
And Councilman DePasquale,
Aye.
Councilman Heckert,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda,
Aye.
myself, aye. Moving on to old business, OB1. OB1, discussion and action regarding charter amendment to compensation for town council members. Solicitor DeSisto did submit to us today the new language and the language as it exists. I will read that now, and Mr. DeSisto can give us some explanation. Let me just check this quickly. Okay. So section 3.14, compensation. Members of the town council shall receive an annual salary of $1,300. Commencing in January 2023, the rate of compensation for members of the town council shall be adjusted annually to reflect changes in the cost of living as determined by the United States government during a 12-month period ending in the immediately preceding year. That is the new language. The existing language is a town council member shall not accept any money from the town of Warren for services rendered except in his/her capacity as town council member. So this amendment was meant to remove from the council the sort of improper position of voting raises for themselves, which always seems strange, like, sure, I'll give myself a raise. So this just ties the increase in council compensation to the consumer price index as it happens every year. Any discussion here from members of the council?
Carrie, I think the current compensation is 1,200, right? So it's actually going to go up 100 if passed.
May I address that? I checked with Fung today, and apparently your compensation right now is pegged at $1,292.20. So what I did is boosted it up to $1,300. So you got an $7.80 raise. And again, commencing in January 2023, after the current term ends, the cost of living adjustments will go in. This language that you see before you is taken from Article 6, Section 3 of the Rhode Island Constitution. And this is how legislators, the language for legislators, they don't vote their raises either. Right now, they just get the CPI increases every year or decreases, depending on what happens.
And that was my question, Madam President. So it can go up or down, correct, Tony?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So would, if the consumer price index goes down, would that, and apologies if you just said this, I was checking to see if there were any public comments at this point on this, and it would appear there are none. If the consumer price index goes down, that would that reflect in a decrease in the council compensation, or would we have to have language that would say it would stabilize every year and never go down?
Well, it shall be adjusted annually to reflect changes in the cost of living. So if there was a decrease in the CPI, there would be a decrease in the compensation to council members.
Okay, so that seems not, I'm not going to be doing this forever, but it would seem that it would not be appropriate to decrease the council compensation. If we could, would the council agree to having language in there that says it only increases with the consumer price index in years when there would be an increase, and that it wouldn't go below the amount that it has increased to? Something in more legal terms, of course.
Carrie, I don't, and Kate may know the answer to this, but I don't think the CPI has gone down in the last 50 years, has it?
I can answer that. There has never been a decrease in the CPI since they instituted that index. But is there a risk? Yes.
Okay.
I think there's a good chance that if there was actually a CPI decrease, that there are some pretty major problems, and there may be lots of people getting a decrease in their compensation.
Okay. So maybe
I would agree with that analysis. Absolutely.
no need for that language then.
No.
Another interesting point is when we had the financial town meetings, the public could have always made a motion to increase the council salary. They never did. The council does have the ability and opportunity to increase salaries for another council, but I don't know of many councils that have ever done that. They just can't do the council they serve on. So to me, looking at this nominal increase, I don't really think it's worth it. I think it would be better to let the reality that we do this as a labor of love versus even taking a vote for the simplest amount of money increase. If you don't like the pay and you don't like the job, don't do it. I don't think that the increase we're talking about is going to bring in a better crop of candidates because the increase of funding is going to be next to nothing. So I'm not in favor of it.
Does anybody else have a comment?
The increase we're talking about is how
Grant,
much?
can I remind everybody when you speak to identify yourself, please?
Sure. This is Brant Heckert. Can I be reminded of the increase, Tony?
You're getting to get up to $1,300, it's $8 annually. And then it's you'd get the cost of living increase. So
But it's $8 annually. Okay.
Well, it's $8 for to 2023.
Right.
And then after that, whatever the CPI percentage increase in, that would be added on to the $1,300.
Madam President, may I ask a question, please?
Councilman Kalenda?
Yep, say, hey, Tony, Steve Kalenda. Do we need to put a cap on this? So that it just doesn't continue going up and up and up? Should we cap it?
I've got to tell you, there's no cap in the state constitution for legislators. And that's why I didn't put it in. But if you want to,
okay,
cap
so
number,
if we were,
would certainly do that.
Well, let's say, what's the average CPI over the past 5 years?
Just please remember to identify yourself.
Okay, Councilman Hanley. What is the average CPI? In other words, if it's 1,300, what are we looking at? How much is it going to go up each year?
This is the solicitor.
Roughly.
You're looking at like between 2 and 3%.
So maybe $10 a year?
Yeah, that's about right.
So after 10 years, it'll be 1,400. After 15 years, it'll be 1,500. I know I'm not going to be around then. Yeah, I don't know. I would be concerned. And this is a charter change. So if we put a cap at it, it would require another charter change to go up above that cap, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so Councilman Heckert?
So I guess I wonder, Councilman DePasquale, are you in favor of just a flat rate, just to hold this at a flat rate and with no escalation of no increase at all, or?
Yeah, we should get $6,000 each. Should get $500 a month. If we're going to do anything, and if you're going to think about ever doing this to bring better candidates forward in the future, I think there has to be a massive increase. If not, you know, I don't think we should be voting for ourselves if we're there, or other people who sit here for $20. I mean, I don't know. There's more important. There are definitely more important things right now happening historically that we need to address our focus on than a potential charter change for $20. I mean, to me, it's just comical. So no, you either go for a reality part-time job, or, you know, a third of a job, or you keep it where it is. That's me.
So if I can respond, this is Brant Heckert again. I think this language was, the purpose of it was to correct me if I'm wrong, Vice President Hanley, I think you brought this up, that it was just to correct the language so that it was cleaner. Is that what I
Well,
remember?
Brian, I originally brought this up because originally we were paid $1,200 a year, even though it's $1,200 and $1,290. That's a violation of the charter. The current council cannot raise the pay for until the term is over, and somehow it went from $1,200 to $1,290, which technically is a charter violation because it you know, by per charter, we can't increase our own salary during our term. And I guess just through the budget process, it was going up to the 3% or something, or however it worked. But that was my concern, to correct that so that so there actually could be a slight raise, you know, linked it to the CPI or whatever. That's what my whole idea was.
That's what I remember. Thank you.
All righty. So as Councilman Hanley just explained, the reason why this came up and the language, the language that was developed because of that concern was to remove the onus on the council to increase the salary every year, or not. And tie it to something else. So it removed that obligation. And no, I don't think any of us are doing this for the pay, but there is a sort of, there is some money attached to the service. And it is more of a, you know, just it represents a little gratitude from the town, I think. We could remove it altogether. We could leave it as it is, or we could have it increase in a way that doesn't put the responsibility on us to make that decision. And if you want to have the discussion of turning it into, you know, a much greater sum, we could. I'm not looking to go in that direction. So I think the language that is here takes us out of violation of the language that exists with the charter right now.
And Kerry, part of that too is, Joe, when you started, what was it, $1,200 way back then?
Yeah, and I can actually say with pride that I was on a council that we evened out with a motion by Frank Alfano. We evened out what the president's stipend was. The president used to get a higher stipend, and that Frank had discussed with me, and we felt at the time that you know, everybody, I think it was unanimous. So no longer did the president's salary get a higher stipend. I don't know where the $90 came from, but yeah, it's always been pretty much $100 a month.
Yeah, because the way I'm looking at it is your time back then in relativity is worth more now than it was then. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, we had 50 and 60 meetings a year back in the day.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it should be linked to something to go up a little bit every year, just because $1,200 20 years ago is not $1,200 20 years later. You know, it's maybe, what's that, about 800 20 years later. So, and that way it's out of the control, the hands of the council and the control of the council. If it's in the charter, then we can't jack it anymore. And I would say put a limit on the 1,500. So another 5 to 10 years from now, they would have to redo it again. That way there, it won't spiral way out of control. If we put a limit at 1,500 right now.
You could ask the manager to, as we do all of the budgetary requests, or not all, but a lot, we could look at the stipends around the state. We could, you know, if we're gonna, my position is, and I'm in agreement with you in regards to looking at this as a technicality. So if indeed we are gonna look at it as a potential charter amendment for a scientific reason, I say look at it across the board, open it up. Don't just, you know, right now today say 1,500. Take a look at what other towns are getting. Take a look at what is out there.
Okay, I think we've all had enough. Mr. DeSisto, if you could please address that. I know you did a little research on some comparisons. Am I correct? You're muted.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I did a check, but I can't say it's comprehensive. It's kind of difficult because, you know, it's sometimes it's an apple and oranges. I know that the Providence City Council members, you know, they have an expense account. They get quite a bit of money for it, but that's Providence. Smaller communities typically do less. As I said to you, many communities, as Joe pointed out, by the way, the council president gets additional compensation. In some instances, it's double what the regular council members get. But there was a vote here in Warren to make that even. I don't have in my possession a graph showing who gets paid what on this. But I understand where the council is coming from. And I think many communities, and in fact, the state have gone with that a process of just tying it to the CPI for increases.
Madam President, is there, I'm wondering if the clerk could answer if this is time sensitive for it to be on the ballot in November.
Julie Coelho, the town clerk. It is. The next step would be a public hearing that's advertised. That would be open to the public on this, any charter change. The question in legal form after approved by the council and the board of canvassers would have to be up at the state to be on the ballot the 1st or 2nd of August. I'm not sure how it falls, but it's usually between the 3rd and the 5th. So it is time sensitive. You'd have June for your public hearing, July to get that into a legal form. If the question's not worded correctly, people get confused and they think they're approving something when they're not. So that has to be done, has to be thought out before it's just written. And then it would have to be at the July meeting for the council to approve that legal wording. And then it would go to Board of Canvass to put it on the ballot for November, and we would send it up to the state.
Can I give one more 2 cents? Since we are going to be having a charter review commission convening, since this wouldn't even be taking place until 2024 or something like that, I think that it's all clearly in the council's position to be interviewed by the Charter Commission, and I think that they can hear us loud and clear. To me, again, I don't want to take an action in regarding to anything having to do with increasing our pay, and especially at this horrible financial time. So I say the time sensitivity is only about this electoral calendar. There's no time sensitivity if we're looking at correcting a possible error in a 4-year time frame. Where is it going to go? That's me.
All right, we've heard enough. Do we have a motion to continue with this, or what's the pleasure of the rest of the council?
So this is just old business. I'd like to make a motion that we ask the town manager to explore the other possibilities and come up with the information that Joe hinted at and Tony said he didn't have the graph, and put it back on the agenda for next month.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, Joe?
Nay.
Councilman Heckert?
Aye.
Councilman Hanley?
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Moving on. OB2, discussion and action regarding the extension and/or amendment of the town's declaration of state of emergency. I think that there is probably a good argument for maintaining or continuing the declaration of state of emergency. I think given the governor's orders, I think we should extend till the next council meeting and sort of follow along with the governor's amendments. They are changing daily, but I think that gives us the opportunity to sort of maintain the level of safety for our citizens and our staff. Kate, do you have an opinion here you would like to share? I know you've been participating in multiple daily state level and federal level conversations.
Sure, I do agree. I think the proper action at this time is to extend the existing state of emergency. However, I do expect that very shortly we're going to be seeing a new executive order from the governor on specific to outdoor dining for restaurants. At that time, it will be necessary for us to amend our declaration of state of emergency because we do specifically mention restaurants in our existing declaration. So what I would recommend is that the council president has the authority to amend our declaration to keep up with the governor's changes. And then that would come back to the council for reaffirmation in accordance with the provisions of the charter. But we don't have that language yet, so we can't actually make that amendment at this time.
So probably the best way of addressing the opportunity for us to be as up to date and as fluid as possible would be to extend and give me the ability to make the amendments to match up with the state. And that will improve our ability to, or support our ability to support our local businesses in their opening.
Correct. And I'd like to ask Anthony too, if he could weigh in on this, because what we've been talking about is in the amended declaration that will have to come out after the governor's amended executive order. There will have to be some kind of a process set forward to do a speedy turnaround on allowing for the outdoor dining in whatever form the governor allows it. The Department of Business Regulation has recommended that, or has requested that communities take a pledge that we will strive to do our best to turn around these restaurants' requests within 48 hours. And certainly from a staff level, we're ready to take that challenge on. You know, I've met with Bob, with Julie, with Anthony, and we're ready for it as soon as we know what the parameters are. But I'm not sure if Anthony might need and want to have anything further to say on that topic.
Yeah, I actually would. And just if I can begin with, I agree with Kerry's comments that the recommendation, my recommendation at least, is to extend the declaration of emergency until your next meeting in June. That's the first thing. The second thing is there should be a provision in that extension that allows for Kerry as the council president to adapt the declaration of emergency to meet the changes at the state level, which the governor is instituting on an almost daily basis. And Kate's correct. There's language in the current declaration of emergency regarding the closing of restaurants. Not only isn't that going to change shortly, but it's also going to change in the future. We've had the opportunity to take a look at what other communities are doing for the restaurant openings. And to me, there's two routes that have been taken. The first one is to have a license for this outdoor dining during the temporary basis in the emergency period. The second one is to delegate that out to your administrative staff by basically saying it's by right, so long as certain requirements that are set forth at the state level and also at the local level are met. And assuming that the restaurant meets those requirements, then they can go ahead on a temporary basis with the outdoor seating without a particular license. That doesn't mean that the town won't have any enforcement authority over it, but it's some good flexibility, and it does cut down the time to permit what needs to be done for these restaurants. That said, the state has some requirements, but they've left some of the other requirements over to cities and towns. What are those? Number one, should the restaurant be allowed to serve off-site and not, a mile down the road, but to adjacent properties and even to properties that are owned by governmental entities? That's one issue. Another issue is whether or not there should be time limits on the serving that are not key to the current time limits in the statutes or the ordinances. If it's outdoors, should it be for less time? Those are the types of issues that are handled at the local level that I haven't seen the state issue any regulations on. So basically, that's what you're looking at. State has it for May 18th, but you ought to be ready to roll on that day for your local restaurants if that's the route you want to take.
Kate, I have a question for the solicitor. Tony, would the executive order or the state of emergency declaration, because we have zoning restrictions that would limit some of that, can that emergency order supersede or suspend those zoning restrictions for the time being?
It can, yes. Under 30-15-9, the governor has the ability to override those types of regulations that deal with either governmental processes or those type of regulations. There's another statute in that same chapter, 30-15-12, that gives that same power over to the local community in emergency areas, similar to what the governor does. And on that basis, zoning regulations can be overridden on a temporary basis.
Thank you.
Do any other members of the council have questions or opinions? Raise your hand and I will call you.
Yeah.
Councilman Di Pasquale.
Is the advice we're given to allow for openings contingent on what the governor is going to request, or open, I should say, her position, or are we? I'm a little confused. Are we trying to guess the future before it happens because we have a bit of an idea of where this is going? Or this could be for the solicitor as well. Are we trying to alleviate a special meeting with some language today? I think our goal is to make it easier for restaurants to open when they're given the green light. But is this something we should simply have a special meeting for when the time comes? I guess that's where I'm thinking, because it seems like we're trying to think about potential wording, or could it be as simple as contingent upon, take a vote today? So that's a question for the solicitor.
Okay, the short answer to your question is you do have a choice, and the question is whether or not you take a vote now to authorize things for Monday, because that's when the governor has stated that's when restaurants will be opening up. And they've already come out with some broad parameters for what they're going to be looking for. And it's been a good enough indication for other communities that have already taken the steps that we're discussing tonight here in Warren. And you have that ability to do that. The question is how best to manage the situation once it takes into effect, which is going to be in 6 days now. And that's what we're discussing tonight. So that's your question. And you could say as a council on a policy basis, look, when the governor's order is set and signed and sent to the Secretary of State, then we can have a meeting. We'll come up with a licensing process that the restaurants can apply for and go from there. Or what you can do, and other communities have already done this, is to say through the declaration of emergency, we'll delegate that ability to regulate based on whatever parameters we have and whatever parameters the state has to allow these restaurants to open up on Monday. So long as they meet the requirements. I'm sorry, Kate.
Oh, sorry, no. If I might, I think my only concern with waiting for a special meeting in order to actually pass specific language is that, obviously you need the 48 hours notice for agendas, and the state law now says that weekends don't count. So that would mean that, if you're going to have a meeting prior to Monday, it would have to be Friday and the agenda would have to be posted tomorrow. So it seems, my recommendation is that the way to be the most nimble in this process is to delegate the power to the council president to do this by executive declaration of a state of emergency. It seems to me that's the way most communities are doing this. And then again, that would come back to the council for an affirmation. That could be done at a special meeting. So if you wanted to come back in a special meeting format to affirm the declaration, make any tweaks that are needed at that time. I think this can be a constantly changing situation. I was listening in on Commerce's Facebook Live event this evening, and they're talking about doing indoor dining perhaps in the beginning of June. So this is going to be changing again in a matter of weeks, potentially. So I think there are, the quicker we can move and the more we can handle administratively, I think it'll be a benefit to our restaurants, the ones who are willing to participate at this point, because there are going to be a lot of restrictions.
And Kate is correct. What most communities are doing is just that, using the declaration of emergency as a kind of an enabling vehicle to allow for the restaurants to open up as quickly as possible, while also instituting the necessary conditions for the opening.
Planner Rowley?
The manager and I had spoken earlier today. I mean, we think that if we allow businesses or restaurants that want to reopen to submit a proposed plan to myself and the building official, we can review that fairly quickly, looking at how they're going to do the seating, what the setbacks are, how they're going to protect customers from parking, and then advise the town clerk as to whether or not it's acceptable. I mean, I think the town clerk has already indicated that many restaurateurs have contacted her already, wanting to know what the regulations are. So, I think the authority to the president to allow us to kind of move quickly on this is, we're not going to unnecessarily hold up people. We believe that there's probably only 10 or 15 restaurants that are going to be able to take advantage of this, because some of the ADA requirements are going to still have to be met. Some instances, that's going to mean that some restaurants are going to lose space. But I think if this is going to work in this limited capacity, our ability to move quickly is going to result in them being successful or not. And I think, again, between the building official, myself, and the town clerk, we can address these things in an expeditious manner.
And I think the restaurants are just the first one up. I mean, you're going to have the barber shops, the nail salons, all of those are probably going to come online with restrictions as well. And if we try to have a meeting for each one of those, it's going to be crazy. I don't have a problem extending the declaration of emergency till next month. Anthony, if the governor, which I don't think she will, if the governor cancels her state of emergency, would that automatically take ours out of play? In other words, if the governor says everything's good, I'm rescinding power back to the General Assembly or to the status quo, does that automatically revert ours?
No, yours would go until next month. If there was a change at the state level of that nature, I'd recommend that you'd come back in for a special meeting and rescind.
Okay.
Okay, Councilman Heckert would like to speak next, and then Clerk Coelho would like to speak after Councilman Heckert. If anybody else would like to speak, who's on screen right now, you can raise your hand and you can go in line after Ms. Coelho. So Councilman Heckert.
Yes, Brad Heckert. I agree with the consensus. I think that we should do everything we can to expedite businesses reopening. And I feel comfortable giving the president authority to amend and then giving that responsibility for the details to our planner and our building official. And knowing that this isn't permanent, and we will have the ability to make changes going forward if necessary and when necessary. So I'm comfortable with it, and I would support it.
Thank you, Councilman Hecker. Ms. Coelho?
Town Council, Town Clerk Julie Coelho, the restaurant owners are calling me because they need some kind of assurance that once they get the okay from the governor, that they're not looking at a week before they even know their plan is okay. They have to then figure out how they're gonna get their tables up, what they're gonna do with staff, call staff back. So even though we could get a meeting together in 48 hours, or it takes me more than 10 minutes to do an agenda, so maybe 49 hours, but that still puts them behind the 8 ball with the other towns that are allowing them, as soon as they have their plan in, and the planner and the building official have said that they meet all the requirements that will keep everyone safe and allow them to go forward. They need to be able to act then, otherwise people are going to go to the other restaurants in other towns, and these restaurant owners in Warren, they've stuck through it, and they've put their heart into it, and I think they need all the immediate response that they can get.
Thank you very much.
Madam
Yeah,
President?
Mr. Rowley?
Yeah, besides myself and the building official, in certain circumstances, consultation with both police and fire would also be part of our evaluation, particularly as it results to, those businesses that want to utilize their parking lot. We're going to want to make sure that there's, sufficient safety precautions to protect diners from those cars in the parking lot. So, but I still believe that, we can begin to have proposals come in terms of what their plan is tomorrow, and begin to evaluate those, so that when Monday comes, those businesses that are ready to go are not unnecessarily being held up.
My intention was,
Councilman Di Pasquale?
yeah, my intention was for a process that was going to satisfy the business request at the time. So I was looking at what my intention was much more of a green light. I wasn't trying to introduce the question as another hurdle. I was pointing out the fact that if we could take a vote contingent upon the governors, that's where I was going. So I didn't want any miscommunication there or confusion. I do think that it would be too long for them to wait for additional time. I just wasn't sure if we had that authority, and Anthony said we do. So I'm in favor of the process.
All righty. Councilman Kalenda, do you have a comment or a question?
I do, and I'll be brief, real quick. So for sake of clarification, because I came from zoning, and during my time on zoning, a large majority of our restaurants came before the zoning board, and a large majority of them already have outdoor seating in place. So Bob, if I stand corrected, when I was reading the protocols from the governor, she put some guidelines in for 6 feet. Is that what you're looking at, is to make sure that they've got their tables properly spaced?
Yeah, I mean, there are actually, we've had this conversation earlier today. There are some of our local businesses that are actually going to lose seating because of the spacing requirement. One thing we've talked about is if they were to go in front of an abutting property owner, if that property owner gave written consent to allow them to use the sidewalk and they met the ADA requirements, we would allow that. But we're going to follow what the governor's guidelines are. The maximum number of tables that can be allowed is 20. So
You put it at 20, yes.
So in a situation like Hometown Tavern, if they made the decision that they wanted to expand, that's a different kind of parking lot situation than some of our other businesses. But the ADA requirements don't go away. Those are federal requirements that the governor doesn't have the ability to make go away. So we need to look at that. But Julie mentioned earlier today that Rod's wants to use their parking lot. I mean, I think Bywater wants to open. I think we can start to move through these pretty quickly, make a determination whether or not this is an acceptable plan that they have.
Yeah, and I'm in support of that. My point being is that some of these folks that already have outdoor seating, they could get up and running right away.
Some of them are actually going to lose seating.
Correct. But for some of them that have a small space, I'm just going to throw out one that may have 2 tables down on Water Street. They're not going to lose anything. Their 2 tables are going to be ready to go.
That's correct.
Yeah. And then to reiterate, I was talking with the solicitor on 30-15-12. Yes, the council president, you have the authority if we are all in agreement, and it seems like we are. I say we just allow the council president to follow suit and be our shepherd, so that if this becomes very fluid, we don't have to come back and have a special meeting. That's it, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no further comments or questions, do we have a motion?
I will make a motion that we continue the state of emergency, allowing the town council president to act as the, to make the changes as the governor comes down with her changes, to allow the businesses of all kinds to get up and running as soon and as easy as possible.
I'll second that motion.
And that
Councilman
motion,
Pasquale. Or do we have a question? Councilman
well,
Heck?
can we put a date on that till the next meeting, correct?
Yes, that's what was
Thank you.
part of the motion. Yeah.
The June meeting.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
for roll call vote, Councilman Di Pasquale,
Aye.
Councilman Heckert,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Thank you. That motion passes. New business, NB1, discussion and action regarding recognition of Mount Hope High School class of 2020. I think it is not lost on any of us whether we have.
Madam President, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but quick question.
Yes.
Tony, do I need to recuse on this?
No.
Okay, thank you. Madam President, continue, please.
Yeah. So what I was going to say was whether we have students in school right now or whether we don't, I think we are all very well aware of what it would be like to be a senior or a student at all right now, but especially our high school seniors this year are having a vastly different experience than they thought they would be having when the school year started. And so I think it's really important that we have a discussion this evening. Tara Thibodeau has been meeting with a group of parents and talking about some ideas of how we can best recognize all of our graduating seniors and honor them in the way that is appropriate and give them the most celebration as possible, and something, hopefully we can do something immediately and then help facilitate a greater celebration when it is safe to do so. So I think we should, if with everybody's approval, I'm gonna let Tara speak and let us know what has been going on and some of the ideas that are out there.
Hi, so we have been meeting with the superintendent, a number of students, the principal, for a couple of weeks now. We initially had looked at doing telephone pole banners, which is why I had originally asked to be on the agenda. The Verizon did not feel that that was a good idea because you'd have to license every pole. It was just not, it didn't make sense to do. So we are doing lawn signs. So, and I believe Kate put that link on the town's website. And so we're recognizing all of the seniors with lawn signs. There is going to be a special thing that goes along with that also for seniors. So that should be a special recognition. I met with the superintendent and the principal today, and we're looking at virtual graduation on the 13th of June. And we're looking at like a movie drive-in. They were going to try to have the kids cross the stage and get their diploma, but due to the restrictions from the governor, they don't feel that that would be the best thing to do. So they're going to do more of a send a picture in, and we're going to make a video of you graduating, and then we're going to show it to everyone on the day of graduation. And so, and then possibly in November, have a actual graduation Thanksgiving weekend. So at the moment, those are the ideas for graduation. Award ceremonies, athletic awards, those are also still in planning stages.
Quite a
What,
mess.
Councilman Di Pasquale?
I forgot about our electronic delay. I just said it's quite a mess.
It's
Okay.
very sad. I feel terrible for the seniors. They are very disappointed. It's very heartbreaking, but we're trying to make it as memorable as possible.
Oh, they won't forget it.
So,
Warren, message from the clerk. Warren, can YouTube the graduation? I like it. So I am on the town website. I've clicked on the show your support for the Mount Hope class of 20. And it says, help celebrate our seniors, Mount Hope High School class of 2020. Each senior will be receiving one sign, compliments of the Bristol Warren Regional School Department. Additional signs can be purchased here. Signs will be available at this link for $10 a sign. There's a link right there, and I believe that is a picture of the sign. And will the seniors' names be going on the signs? Can they be
They will
purchased?
not.
Or it's just a recognition? So,
Yes.
so I would encourage people to buy up some signs, post them all, put them everywhere.
I also want to recognize the fire department because they have offered in Bristol and in Warren to help us to get the signs to the seniors. So I will be talking to Jimmy later on once I have dates of the dates that we're going to be doing it. They did volunteer to help us out to make it more of a parade.
So if I were to click on this and buy a sign, how would I be getting that sign?
So that we haven't determined yet. It may be a pickup location. To be honest with you, I may just do it at Mary V. Quirk or a park location for people who are do not have a senior. They will be getting theirs delivered, but for people in the community that purchase them, I probably will just pick a location and have people pick them up.
Okay.
And Madam President, if I may, Steve Kalenda here. I had a quick conversation with the principal at Mount Hope High School, and she had mentioned that there's a group of students that are delivering the signs, and I told her, I said, if you needed some assistance, by all means, just reach out to me. So I think members of the SIT group and the other advisory group there, Tara, are coordinating and delivering the signs to the seniors.
Councilman Heckert.
this is Brant Heckert. Thank you, Tara, for the effort you're putting in here. It's incredibly challenging year and disappointing in so many ways. Whatever can be done, I think is important. And but this item is asking for action in recognition. What is it specifically can we do as a council to help further your efforts?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure at this moment. I think the action was originally supposed to be, we needed permission from the town councils to approve banners on the poles. So I think that was the initial action. But I also just wanted to get you guys up to date on what we have been doing and how we will be celebrating the seniors just for the 2020 year.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate
Madam
it.
President, if I may, really real quick. Tara, in your office, I believe you have a photo of a picture of all the kids from the park. It's kind of like a compilation of all the years. I remember seeing it up on your wall. Do you know what I'm referring to?
I have a collage each year.
Collage each year, okay. How about we do something like that with all the photos of the 2020 class, and we put it on display in banner form, either at town hall or, pick a building.
We have a meeting tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock with the students, the principal and the superintendent. And a couple of parents. I will definitely bring that to their attention.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tara. And I would say, yes, please do keep us posted on any new developments and, you know, whatever we can offer you in space on the town website, banners, photos, slideshows, anything to recognize our seniors. We are behind it and ready to go. And yeah, so thanks.
You're welcome.
Can't we put can't we get all the Warren seniors and have pictures of them and put them on the front of the town hall?
We can, we're also trying to because they're almost adults, we want them to also be in favor. So I will bring all of these ideas to them. Yeah, no.
Because
So
we could do something, it doesn't have to be giant, but you know, we could have an honor, an honor roll.
yeah, no, listen, this is different. This is different.
Unprecedented.
Yeah, we can pick. No, I won't say it. I won't say it. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
NB2 report on Memorial Day activities. Who was going to give that report? Kate, Julie?
Kate Nisho here. I just wanted to before we go forward, I just want to make sure that the public was aware that, and I know that you mentioned it, but just reiterate that there is a link on the town's website it's under news. So if anyone's looking for it, it's on the homepage under news. Sorry. Now, for the Memorial Day activities, town clerk Julie Coelho has been in contact with the organizers, and I think she's prepared to give an update.
Town Clerk Julie Coelho. I spoke with General Valenti. They are going to video the ceremonies ahead of time. He was concerned that people would converge on the two locations because it's so historic that they do it every year, and then they wouldn't be able to contain or control the gathering. So they are going to video the ceremonies ahead of time with just the committee members. Then they are going to post it on Facebook. I spoke to Jay at Clerk Base today, and he's going to create a YouTube page for the town of Warren that's non-town council or planning. So that's when I said we could also do the high school, the seniors, their virtual graduation, or however they handle it, any ceremonies we'll be able to post there. I spoke to David McCarthy, who is doing the Vietnam ceremony. He is going to do it. It's by invitation only. It's there are a few veterans, so there will be 5. If people come, they have to maintain the 6 foot with the mask and not come close, or else they're going to have to end it. But it's going to be very brief, and it's invitation only to, so there'll be 5, and they will be all the veterans.
Great, thank you. If there are no questions, we can move on to Recreation Director. Discussion and action regarding awarding concession rights bid, and we have award of Pilates. Tara, are you there?
Yes. So we traditionally have concession rights every year. The bid came in. Dell's was a higher bid, but I am asking to go with Pilates because they offer more items of choice, and also they have they're more inexpensive, or they're less expensive.
The prices are better.
The prices are better for this population.
That's good. Any discussion? Do we have a motion to?
I'll make a motion. We award the concession rights to Pilates as recommended by the Recreation Director.
Second that.
Roll call. Councilman De Pasquale.
Aye.
Councilman Heckert.
Aye.
Councilman Hanley.
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thank you. And number 2, discussion and action regarding 2020 Warren Summer Concert Series and food truck nights.
So this is, of course, contingent on the governor's restrictions, but we do want to, and I've let the performers know that So I believe Tony was supposed to come up with a language for the contract that stated that this was contingent on conditions for governor's restrictions. I was on a meeting today with the Rhode Island Parks and Recs Association, and they were asking input from different recreation programs. They didn't have any information on whether they think this will happen in the summer, but there is, we're going to have another conversation next week. So the ongoing conversation between the recreation departments with the governor is taking place. So hopefully we have more information.
Madam President, if I may, I'm waiting to see what the action of the town council is tonight, and depending on what you all do, then I will provide the necessary language to Tara on this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as much as I think we'd all like to see the concert series start on July 12th, right now, if I were to make a guess, that's probably not likely. So if we could get some language to allow this program to start, if it is, if the governor approves events of this nature, then that would, I think, be the best thing to do. And as long as the acts who've been booked understand that they may or may not be performing, I think that's pretty clear. That's probably the best we can do to make this happen. So I guess the motion would be to approve the summer concert series and food truck nights contingent upon the governor's recommendations, and have the solicitor draw up contract reflecting that.
I'll make that motion.
I have one question. Why is July 19th? Why does it say 500-200? What's that? Is that 700 or is it 300?
It's two performers. It's two separate performers, and that's their rates.
So it's 700.
Correct.
All right. I was just curious why that one was like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve the summer concert series and food trucks pending the governor's requirements and the solicitor working out the proper language for the contracts or the agreements.
I'll second that.
Roll call. Councilman DePasquale.
Aye.
Councilman Heckert.
Aye.
Councilman Hanley.
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda.
Aye.
And I for myself. Finally, number 3, we have discussion and action regarding awarding a bid for loan for the dog park. Tara, that's you again.
Yes, so the dog park is been cleared. We are now ready to bring the loom in. ELJ came in as the lowest bidder. We're going to be getting about 500 yards of loom. We'll be putting up the fence posts and then, spraying the loom, and the project will be getting completed.
Okay.
And that cost is $9,000.
It is.
So you're looking for a motion not to exceed 9,000, because on the front it does. I don't see what's the total?
The total.
Is there a 3, 1,800, 9,000?
Yeah, so this is for 500 yards, so it's the largest total.
So that's for $9,000.
Yes. Yes, $18 a yard.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, Councilman DePasquale. Councilman Heckert.
Aye.
Councilman Hanley.
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda.
Aye.
Aye, myself. I have a question. What is the governor's recommendation right now for dog parks? I feel like I've driven by some in Providence and seen people there with their dogs throughout the COVID.
This park would not be open anytime soon. So even if the fence, because we still have to plant grass.
Right.
So I believe it falls under the same thing as all other parks and park facilities. It's up to the towns to make the decision on the facilities.
Okay.
Tara's correct. They're treated the same as parks.
Okay. And your best guess of a timeline for when we may see this open?
So I'm gonna try to grow grass first. And then, so maybe next, fall or spring, depending on how successful we can be, getting everything, getting the signage, getting the grass, But I also wanted to mention that we did receive the Rhode Island DEM Parks and Recreation Grant for $400,000. I know that it's been in the paper. So we're very excited about all of that. We're working on the beach playground as we speak. And then of course the new building. So we're very excited about being awarded that grant.
I had a question from a constituent. Is the new building going to go where the old bathrooms are?
No. So my hope is that that old building remains where it is. I would like to even see it become maybe changing rooms, just to change its usage, but I would like to see that building remain where it is. The new building will go up where the summer recreation tent is put up.
Yep.
So it will take the place of the current location of the shed and where the tent is.
So next to the band.
Next to the band shell.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
Well, the current location, the current bathrooms are in the flood zone.
Yep.
So we wouldn't be able to put something on that side of the park.
And the adult swings. People want the adult.
Oh, I have adult swings. There are 4 of them. We are all set, Joe.
Thank you.
We
All
lost
right.
Joe.
Finance Director, update on revenue and expenditures.
Joe disappeared.
No,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh,
yes,
Joe
this is
disappeared.
our Finance Director from Chan.
Madam President, we'd have to pause if Joe is not on, no? It looks like we lost.
I don't see Joe on the screen.
Yeah, it looks like we lost Councilman DePasquale.
You still have I'll check where he is, but you still have a quorum so you can continue.
Okay.
Ms. Chan, please continue.
Okay, through April, so far, we still have a surplus, but things can change as we know that we're not certain on certain things. Some revenues are definitely down, but tax collection seems healthy. The May 1st collection seems very good. So far, our collection rate is about 95%. So our usual collection rate for the whole year would be around 99%. So, I mean, we're not that far off. As of now, we have about 51 accounts that are subject to tax sales, and the notice to postpone the tax sale is out. It is not happening until sometimes in September. So that part of money is not going to be collected until September. But I'm not too concerned because the tax sale, by the time we have tax sales, that amount of money we would collect it. So it's just a timing issue in here. So in terms of our biggest revenue, I think we are in good shape. We are down on some expenses because we don't incur them, but at the same time, we are up on some personnel costs because of overtime or differential pay because of some people being out. But so far, we are still on the positive trend.
So those expenses that have been incurred due to COVID are all being tracked and reported for reimbursement.
Correct.
Okay.
The expenses, I am projecting about 188 through end of June, but that is everything that incurred, including some expenses that may not be allowed by FEMA. So out of that 188, I'm estimating about 140 that's not allowed by FEMA because they don't reimburse regular hours or some equipment. So we are looking into hoping that the state will open up relief fund for us to get reimbursed for those expenses.
And will the submission of these expenses, COVID-related expenses, how often are those submitted? And is the state given any indication of when reimbursement?
The Rhode Island EMA is prefer to have it on a monthly submission. It will be easier for them as well. They go through it and FEMA goes through it as well.
Joe, black screen, and there's no light on.
All right, what you want to do is go check.
Can we mute Joe for the moment? Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Heckert or Councilman Heckert?
Thank you, Grant Heckert here. Hi, Ms. Chen. Chen, thank you. I guess I'm wondering what your expectations are for revenue considering the conditions currently. They're dropping dramatically on the state level, and we're seeing a doubling of the deficit there. So what are your expectations going forward?
I mean, we are 10 months through the year so far. In terms of state aid, I think we collected most of the meal tax and MV. But at this point, the state can revise their current year MV phase-out reimbursement. So that's our biggest concern because just that alone is about $600,000+ on an annual basis. So that's a concern for this year, and it's also a concern for next year too. So state aid is an issue for us.
Yes, that's my concern as well. And I think that going forward, we're going to have to keep a much tighter take a much stronger look at what's happening, immediately. So.
It is, but at the same time, we don't really have control over that.
I understand.
Any other questions before we move on to number 2 for Ms.
Yes,
Chan?
Ms. Cronin.
Mr. Councilman Di Pasquale?
Yeah, I had a power outage. Something happened to my video over here, but my question is valid. Ms. Chan,
yes.
When we're in the situation we're in, the town of Warren is fiscally healthy, and after all is said and done, I believe we will have the appropriate funds in the general fund to balance our books. And that question is also for Mr. Solicitor. That is a legal option, correct?
I believe so, to use the fund balance to for next fiscal year.
Correct.
That's not something I think you want to do.
Then how would we overcome any potential fiscal shortfalls due to the COVID?
Well, Fung, you're not in that position yet, are you?
No, we are not. I mean, I actually anticipate of that plan as well if it comes to the point that to use the fund balance to cover some of the lost revenue or over expenditures.
That's correct, yes.
Right, that's maybe my question wasn't accurate enough. That was my intention, is that as much concern as there may be over the budget and over all of these different line items, the positive position that we're in financially will be there to offset any of these fiscal problems. So the people of the town of Warren don't have to worry about our health. The council has done a good job. The manager's done a great job. And this is a fiscal bump in the road, but I don't want anybody to think that, their taxes are going to go up because of this, or there can be any, really long-term fiscal impact, I feel, looking at the potential costs.
Right.
Thank you. I'm sorry you can't see me.
All righty. Any other questions from the council?
Kate wants to talk, Carrie.
Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I will keep everybody updated as we hear more regarding the state's budget process. I'm sure you heard about the revenue estimating conference. I think between this fiscal year and next fiscal year, the state's estimating around $800 million deficit. And that does not include meals tax, beverage tax, or hotel tax, because they don't include those in revenue estimating. So I think the big things that we need to track are how is the state going to use the $1.25 billion in federal aid that they've already received? Will the federal government allow them to use any of those funds to plug revenue deficits? Because right now the IRS rules say that they can't, but there's potential to change that possibly in the future. And will there be any further aid that comes out through additional assistance programs through the federal government? And then really what the cities and towns are doing just to push as hard as possible to maintain the revenue streams that we really need to maintain, which includes school aid. I mean, we're in a very healthy financial position as a town, but if there was to be a considerable cut in the school aid, that would have a detrimental effect. Obviously, we receive around $7 million in school formula aid. And then, as Fung mentioned, just making sure that if at all possible, that the state, it gives us as much notice as possible of what they intend to do with the motor vehicle tax phase out. Again, that's around $600,000. So that's much less of an impact than the school aid.
I did read.
Mr. Hanley speaking.
Yes, I did read in the paper that the school is looking at a $1.4 million surplus due to the physical buildings being shut down. So that should offset any issues they run into.
I think the issue is going to come in the fall because if there are social distancing requirements, hoping that school goes back into session in the fall, that could necessitate additional classroom space, or we really can't predict at this point what that'll mean. But the general consensus has been that yes, all school districts are seeing savings right now, but that there's going to be additional costs later, potentially additional busing costs. If students have to sit every other seat on a bus, that means they're going to have twice as many buses, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of conversation going on about that.
Okay. Planner Rulli, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so some of you may or may not be aware, I've been hosting twice weekly meetings with the business community, and every Thursday I've had, the last 3 weeks, I've had members of our federal delegation as guests. And one of the things that we've been trying to make them aware of is the need for whatever the next stimulus is, and what is presently proposed in the House of Representatives and Congress right now is money for cities and towns, that they're aware of the fact that we need funding for cities and towns. It doesn't seem like there's sufficient funding in whatever the state has received so far from the federal government to reimburse cities and towns. So, we're working this at many angles. Our federal delegation is fully in tune to what we're looking for. I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you. Can I just ask everybody one more time to physically raise your hand if you want to speak? And I realize that we cannot see Councilman DePasquale. If he could use the raise hand function that's on the lower bar of your screen, most likely, just to keep the experience for our viewers who are watching and who are just listening, so they can decipher who's speaking. If there are no further questions about the revenues and expenditures, we can go on to discussion and action regarding abatement of $68.20. Ms. Chan, did you want to quick explain?
It's a bankruptcy. Our collection attorney is recommending us to abate it.
I will make a motion. We abate the amount of $68.20 as requested by the finance director.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Councilman Hanley, second by Councilman Kalenda. Councilman Di Pasquale,
Aye.
Councilman Heckard,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda.
Aye.
Aye for myself. Going on, planning and community development. Mr. Rulli, number 1 is the memorandum of understanding. You can start and give us an explanation of where we're at with that agenda item. Please. You're muted.
You
I am unmuted now. Thank you. So several months ago, you authorized me to, as a council, to engage in conversation with both Brady Sullivan and Giovanni Giacone, who had, subsequent to our RFP for a development partner, had submitted a request. Over the subsequent months, we've had conversations with both Brady Sullivan, collectively with Mr. Giacone, as to how this might work. Brady Sullivan is involved in a number of different development projects in Massachusetts right now, as well as New Hampshire and Rhode Island, and doesn't feel that they're in a position to move forward in an expeditious way with the town. So subsequent to that reality, we then talked to Mr. Giacone about how this might go forward. I don't, as I expressed to the council previously, I don't think we're in a position right now to talk about what a lease for the National Grid property would be. We do not have a firm handle on what development costs are going to be, what building costs are going to be, and what the project is ultimately going to look like. Mr. Giacone has been very patient in working with us, and we have a memorandum of understanding that has been developed. The solicitor and I have both offered our comments on that. It's gone back and forth. We think we're close to having a final agreement. So the memorandum of understanding is nothing more than a dance card to let us continue to move forward in these discussions. Some of the things that we need to look at is getting a firm handle on what the development costs are going to be, a firm handle on what kind of federal or state funding might be available. The ability to work together in partnership with a development partner is advantageous because the equity that the development partner brings is constitutes a match for us for grant money. And we still have the eligibility for EDA, federal EDA funding. And the timeline that's set forth in the agreement, for whatever reason, Mr. Giacone or the town can't fulfill that, we walk away from this. This is not the lease. This is not the final agreement with respect to the development of this property, but it's an initial step to getting to a point where we can realize whether or not this is going to work or not. And Mr. Giacone is at some risk. He's going to expend some of his own funds to explore some of these options. The town is going to expend some funds in my time in terms of some of the federal money that might be available. We think there's money available for development of the Riverwalk through the SNEP program. As I said previously, we know that we're eligible for some Economic Development Agency money. And we've had the property for 6 months now. I think it's important for the community to see that the town is moving forward with this project. As we get to the expiration of what the memorandum of understanding is, if we're not close to having a deal, then we have the ability to walk away. And I'll defer to the solicitor to address the legal issues. But we have a tenant that is interested in bringing a business to Warren for the property. I mean, that portion of the property that is a slab. They're starting to expend some costs and engaging a architect and engineers to look at that. So, I mean, we've got a lot of positive momentum, and, you know, I know we're in a negative time right now, but I think this is a real opportunity for us to continue to do the right things, in which was motivated for us to acquire this property. So I'll defer to the solicitor in terms of some of the, you know, legal issues, but I hope that you'll be supportive of authorizing the council president to enter into the MOU and let us continue to move forward with this project.
Okay. My first question is, through this evening's review and discussion of this memorandum of understanding, do we have the ability to make adjustments, tweaks, if the council would like to do that? So is that on the table this evening? If the goal is to agree to this, do we have the opportunity to discuss some issues or changes?
May I answer that?
Yes.
The answer to the question is yes. Mr. Ciccione is on the call tonight, and I assume he's going to speak at some point.
I see him.
But I will say this. I did make several suggestions during the course of the negotiations on the matter, and he's been pretty amenable to the comments that I've made. I don't doubt that he would be the same if there are points raised tonight on the agreement. Bob's correct, by the way. This memorandum of understanding gives some comfort to the developer to go forward on this and start putting some time into it, but it's not the final document. Assuming everything goes according to plan and the benchmarks are met in the course of the agreement, then at that time, the lease would be put together, and that would be the governing document.
So there is no guarantee if we were to discuss and decide to just approve this memorandum of understanding tonight as it is written, that does not mean that the ultimate lease is going to have this exact same language and sort of and agreements in it.
To a point, because if you'll note in the document, there is language in there as to what the lease will look like. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you're mostly correct, but there are parameters for what the lease contains, and I think those are the things you have to take a look at. One of the concerns I have, we've discussed this, is that you need a long-term lease for matters of this nature if you're going to get financing for it. And I have some concerns about that. There are cases here in Rhode Island basically saying that councils have a limited time to bind their towns in contracts, and they can't bind future councils. That's why you typically see municipal contracts in the 3 to 5 year range at the maximum. This would be 50 years. And that's because if the developer is to get financing for this, the banks want to know that the developer would have site control for that time. It's a concern. It could be subject to legal attack.
Madam President, if I may, so from the beginning, whether, you know, with Brady Sullivan and with Mr. Giappone, I've been fairly consistent that I don't believe we're in a position to talk about lease payments yet, because we don't know what the development costs are. We don't know what the construction costs are. The memorandum of understanding allows us that period to investigate what those costs are going to be. You know, fortuitously enough, and if it works out, we have a tenant that is interested in having a business at this location. So again, this is, you know, not binding. You know, we need to make decisions whether the town's going to own the buildings or the developer's going to own the buildings. That will impact whether it needs to go through zoning or not. But we're not quite there yet, because we don't know what the cost of the development is going to be. We don't know what the amount of federal funding and the amount of grant money that we're going to get is. But if we're able to move forward and represent, particularly with the EDA, that we have a development partner and that they're going to put equity into this project, and that equity, you know, equates to a match, that's advantageous to us. So, you know, as long as the solicitor is comfortable and Mr. Giacconi is comfortable that at some point, you know, we realize this doesn't work, we can all walk away, I think this is a good thing. But my hope is at the end of the period of the MOU that we determine that we can work together and that this project can go forward, because we've spent $500,000 of taxpayer money for a piece of property that I think we have an obligation to do something with.
Absolutely. And because we did spend $500,000 of taxpayer money, I think it's incumbent upon us, the council, to be as explicit and clear and confident in anything that we sign. And I know I have a few questions. A few things stand out to me in reading this, and it takes a few readings because I am not a lawyer and there is a lot of legalese in here. So some of the language is a bit difficult to get over. The one thing that jumps out at me specifically is on page 5, and that's the purchase option for developer after 10 years. So can you speak to that, Solicitor DeSisto, what that exactly means? Because I feel like it has taken us, you know, more than 10 years. It's taken forever, as long as I've lived here, looking at that building and wanting it, and as long as many on the council have lived here, seen that building, and now that we finally own it, the notion of it being, you know, slipping away from our control seems a little like against what I envisioned. And that would be such a decision, going back to what Solicitor DeSisto said about making decisions that exceed the time that you know, any of us would be in elected office, making such major decisions on that would impact future councils and the future of the community. That concerns me, that one, the option to buy or to sell or to not have it anymore.
Well, I actually, that language was added on after I raised the initial question about, you know, the long-term nature of the lease. And I think that was one of the responses that Mr. Ciccione had to this, was to put in, he can correct me if I'm wrong, Gio, I know you're on the call, but that was put in just to say that, you know, this may be a shorter term type of a thing, but that is a standard option to purchase. The option is at the sole option of the developer in this. And assuming that that's the case, and the developer exercises the right to purchase, the purchase would take place under the broad guidelines here, but it would be spelled out in greater detail in the lease. And it would be subject to the public access remaining. So that's, I mean, it's something I think that the developer wanted to take a look at if things are working out and it makes sense to purchase, subject to the town's right of way to the shoreline over there. That would be something that would take place, but that's not at the option of the town. That would be at the option of the developer.
And the idea was that it would reimburse the town for the money that we spent to acquire the property. But again, what that purchase price would be is undetermined at this point, because we have not determined what the development costs are going to be. What costs are going to be incurred by Mr. Giacconi, and what costs are going to be incurred by the town, or the value of funding that the town is able to bring to the project through grants and other funding sources.
Okay, I suppose, Mr. Ciccone, welcome. Thank you for being here. Sorry, I haven't acknowledged you yet. I can see you. It seems as though some can and some cannot. I think if we started and gave each of the council members the opportunity to ask questions and make whatever comments about this this document, let's start that. So Mr. De Pasquale, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I think that it's refreshing to have a bidder. Gio, thank you for coming forward and participating. I am a bit hesitant only because of I should say, I'm not hesitant in the overall development of the project. I'm a little bit hesitant on the fact that we don't know where we're going with this. And I do hear you, Bob, about we've spent money and we do need to get something going. But because I've been involved for 20 years, I really don't think that is necessarily a valid reason to rush forward. Not that we're rushing, but I would like to see a little bit more of an actual physical proposal.
I think that, to answer your question, Joe, we offered this solicitation on a national level. We put it out on a national platform.
Right.
And we got one proposal from Brady Sullivan, who was not able to, kind of move forward in a timely way. Mr. Giaccone came in after the fact. We rejected the Brady Sullivan proposal. The council directed me to talk to both parties. Mr. Giaccone is, we had a vision for what we wanted this site to be. We wanted to rehab the existing brick building that was there, and we wanted to use the existing slab that was there that our engineering study had indicated was viable and could be reused. We wanted to create public space. We wanted to extend the river walk from that Brady Sullivan and now Star Development has along their property. And Mr. Giaccone has said, yeah, I'm willing to do all of those things. And the MOU says that, the town still has ultimate control over what happens and what is developed on this site. So, there's not, there are limitations to this site because you can't do residential housing on the site because of the environmental land use restriction. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to an office building. Part of our conversations with Brady Sullivan was, okay, if we can't go forward as partners, we'd like to go forward with having a cross easement agreement so that we can eliminate the existing driveway to this property, so not to have more traffic confusion than what's there now. Brady Sullivan seems inclined to have that conversation. So again, the memorandum of understanding doesn't commit us to anything other than to having a conversation with Mr. Giaccone to see if he has the ability to bring the financing necessary to do this project, where we are with prospective tenants, which we have one identified that is engaging and spending some money, and whether or not the town is comfortable. So this is not a final lease agreement. This is just giving Mr. Giaccone some comfort that during this process, for the time period that's set forth in the agreement, that we're not going to say, okay, thanks for your help, we're going to go work for somebody else. This is we're exclusively dating now.
So this, yeah, all right. So this isn't the acceptance of a proposal; it's the acceptance of him to bring a better structured proposal, the beginning of his proposals. Is that what?
Right. He's gonna expend some money now,
right.
And this is our exclusive agreement that we're not going to turn around and say, hey, thanks for doing that, but we're going to do something with somebody else.
All right. Well, that sounds bad. I wasn't sure if we were, exactly what. That's good. I'm comfortable with that at this point. An MOU. Thank you, Bob.
Madam Chair, may I just say one thing?
Yes, Mr. DeSisto.
Thank you. Bob is correct, but this Mr. Ciccione is going to be spending money. This is, this is skin in the game for him, and, you know, it's an exclusive, and he can do this. But I do want to make it clear that he's making a commitment himself in a very tangible and monetary fashion. So I want to make that clear. We're going to be talking and everything else, but he's actually going to be spending money on this thing. And in return for that, he needs to have some commitments from the town in order to do that, so the rug doesn't get pulled out from him in the end. Is that correct, Gio?
Yes, that's correct, Tony. Thank you. And thank you, Council Chair and councilors, for the opportunity to answer questions tonight. I don't want to, soft play what your attorney just told you, right? I mean, we intend to spend, some number of tens of thousands of dollars with architects and engineers and planners and site assessments and designers and all those things, in somewhat of a rapid pace. Honestly, I think we want to do it as quickly as possible because I think I think the site deserves to be developed. I think it's a great opportunity. But and I'm happy to come back and work with the council as often as the council chooses to have me back to look at options and plans and fine-grained details. But if we can make all this work, and if we can make the budgets work and find the right tenants and come up with a plan that satisfies everyone, as it was just said, I don't want the rug pulled out from under me. I have an expectation that we will get to a lease, a fair and negotiated lease, but within the terms of the MOU. But obviously it'll be its own legal document, and the council will have a final say in that. But I can't commit to spending that and making that investment without knowing that I've got the support of the council to go ahead and do that. If I also, sorry, Madam Chair, if I also say to your earlier point, I understand your concern about the sale of the property being a component of this. I think that adds value for a developer, certainly, right? So it makes it more affordable for the town to have me come spend my money on or my in banks or investors' money, whatever it is, on the improvements. But also, I think what we tried to do in the MOU at your attorney's urging and with some pressure was to make sure that this planning period, this 6-month or however many month planning period, is the opportunity for the town to put its mark on this property, right? If you just handed it off tomorrow and sold it to somebody and they built the densest development they could possibly build on it, that would be one solution. The town would get a nice paycheck or a nice check from the purchase, and you'd have something there that the town had no input on. If we spend the next 6 months having a sort of joint effort, a true public-private partnership, and come up with a design for the site that satisfies the town's needs, then the town will have spent that 6 months, making its mark and bearing fruit of all the effort you put into getting the site, right? And I think that's the sort of beauty of this deal, is that it's the best of both worlds. It's not going to be the densest, most profitable development in Warren, I guarantee you that. But the town will have the ability to add public value through the process.
Thank you. Would you clarify something for me, please?
I'll try.
How do you say your name?
I private message Bob at the start of this. Sorry, Bob, I don't mean to call you out. Ciccione is the appropriate way. Ciccione.
Good to me.
Ciccione. All right. So now, Councilman Heckert, do you have any?
By the way, that's why everyone just calls me Gio, because it's impossible to pronounce.
Gio it is. Councilman Heckert.
Good evening, Gio.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
So, Bob, I pulled up the memorandum that you sent us back in March, where you said of the two proposals that you felt the Brady Sullivan proposal gives the town and the site the most flexibility in terms of parking and design. Additionally, the elimination of the driveway at the grid site could potentially allow for the construction of a third building. So that changes a bit here with this.
It actually doesn't. I mean, we had conversations. Because I'm phonetically challenged, I'm just going to go with Gio. Gio and I and Brady Sullivan had calls previously in meetings. So my representation at that time was because Ray Sullivan was the abutting property owner, that we could kind of not necessarily merge those titles to the property, but make those properties become seamless by eliminating the fence and the two driveways. When it became clear in our conversations, and Gio was part of this with Brady Sullivan, that they had too much on their plate, they were amenable to kind of the same situation. And this is the cross easement agreement that we're talking about, that we would still, I mean, nothing really changes. We're going to still get what we want. Brady Sullivan will still benefit from, how we're developing the property, the extension of the Riverwalk, having a development that's complementary to what they have. So, I mean, none of that has changed, other than Brady Sullivan just does not have the capacity right now to move forward with this project. But they are 100% aware that we are working with Geo, and the tenant that Geo is working with for the slab site, Brady Sullivan had talked to them. So there's no inconsistencies. I've had conversations with Brady Sullivan's attorney last week. We are trying to continue the conversation on formalizing the cross easement agreement. So I don't think that anything has changed with that in that respect.
Okay, I understand that. And I noticed that in this lease, there is a clause that says an easement for access through the driveway of American Tourist Development to the south will be negotiated and executed and shall run with the land, town's responsibility. So that's part of this lease agreement. And if that doesn't happen, is what happens?
I think without that cross easement agreement, this becomes a difficult project, because, and I'm confident, and I say that, yeah, I can't ignore the fact that if we didn't have that would be a problem. But I'm confident that Brady Sullivan realizes the benefit of having the cross easement agreement, because it is an extension of the Riverwalk at no cost to them, that the programming at this site is complementary to what they have. But the idea that we would have two separate driveways parallel to each other at this location is not beneficial to anybody. And again, I mean, there's no final document signed, so there is some risk. But again, this is not the final lease agreement. This is just the memorandum of understanding to continue to talk to all parties involved to try to get to a point where we have agreement on what all the final terms are going to be.
If I may, if I was Brady Sullivan, and I've done small scale residential development, nothing like what they've done there, but if I was in their shoes and I looked out my northerly windows of all my tenants, units, and saw, razor wire top chain link fence for the next 3 years, I would start doing that math in my head about what that's costing me. And for them, I think they have a huge financial interest in seeing this site develop promptly and develop well. And I think that they understand that. There's no secret there. It's not, it's not news to anyone that having that site fixed up would be a huge financial boon to them. So I
think that, nothing that Geo is planning is inconsistent with what everyone has bought into, the conceptual plan that we as the town have provided. Brady Sullivan has bought into that plan. Geo has bought into that plan. That conceptual plan right now is the rehabilitation of the existing brick building that's there, and the building of something on that existing slab. Potentially, is there the ability to build a third building? Maybe, yes, but that's not a requirement. But the architectural renderings that we've come up with, everyone loves those. Everyone wants to work with those. And that's the direction that we're going.
Yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate that, and my concern was about two driveways and clarifying that situation. That I think that's very important, and I noticed in the lease that right in the second paragraph it talks about how the development of the property is intended to follow the conceptual plan that was given by Union Studio. So I get that, you know, we're all on the same page. We all want the same thing, maybe just slightly different. I also, though, wanted to just clarify that there's supposed to be a public access and public part of this plan. And Gio, in your initial proposal, you wrote in one paragraph that, of course, the walking path, the landscaping of public access areas, and any other waterfront access improvement would require some public support, either through federal grants or other means. But I just want to make sure that that is a specific intent of this property, is that there'll be some public access component. And I'm not sure if it's written into this document or.
But again, I mean, Brent, this is not the lease agreement. This is the, you know, making sure that we go forward looking at those sources. So we are talking to Southern New England Estuary Preservation in terms of SNEP grants for what that area about the Riverwalk would look like. Advantageous to us to partner with a private developer to pursue the EDA funding, whether that's technical assistance or for development, so that the developer's equity contribution could be the town's match for that grant. But the memorandum of understanding is not the lease agreement. We could get 6 months down the road, we could get a year down the road and say, this is not going to work. And the town is not obligated to go forward anymore with Geo.
And my expectation is that there will be, I mean, one of the great beauties of this site is that the public access is what drives the economic value, right? The fact that you've got the bike path there, the fact that you've got water access, the fact that you've got the river walk, all coming together at this gateway for the town. That's really the fun of the site as a developer, is that you bring people in from all these different directions, and your tenants get the economic benefit of that. And I think if we didn't have that, it would just be another, you know, chunk of land along the river.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think that's, I'll speak for myself, but I imagine the other council members would say the same thing, that public access and openness here to an extent, with it, obviously it is a somewhat private development, I understand that, but you know, we don't want to see a little gated community there, so to speak. So
I would just say that this is not private development. This is a public-private development. Okay. And we came up with a concept plan, and people fell in love with that concept plan. That was the concept plan that allowed you as the council to authorize us to acquire this property. And I think we've made it very clear to Brady Sullivan initially and to Geo, this is the plan. You know, this is the plan. I mean, there's no, you know, density increase here. This is what we want to see happen. And this is a process that allows us to vet that. If we get to the end of the 6 months or the 1 year and we can't agree that this is what the town would like to see, then the provisions within the MOU is that, you know, we go separate ways and we start over again. And you know, I think Tony and I have been very careful in protecting the town's interests, that the town has the ultimate say in terms of what happens here. But right now, the MOU is just giving Geo some security that he's going to expend some funds and not have somebody, you know, come in next month and say, hey, you know what? Gilbane came in and had a better deal. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Councilman Heckert, do you have any further questions?
No, I'm satisfied at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Hanley.
Yeah, I'm satisfied with what was presented. My biggest concern is the concern you expressed earlier yourself about the option to buy, where we have no say in that. I don't know if it could be worked in where it was the right of first refusal rather than the option to buy. But that scares me where it's an option to buy. It's not really an option to buy. It's if you want it, you buy it. So it's not really an option for the town. It's an option for the developer. But I don't really have an issue proceeding here at this point. But when we do get to Tony, it will come back to us for the final lease agreement.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And
But yeah,
to your concern, John, so, you know, one of the things that we have not resolved is, so the town would own, the town obviously owns the land, whether we have a ground lease or not. So one of the questions is, does the town own the buildings, the improvements on the building that are on the site, or does the developer own those? We haven't resolved those yet. And that's part of the negotiation in terms of going forward, in terms of what, if there was to be a purchase agreement. You know, the purchase agreement, you know, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, it could be 30 years. It doesn't have to, you know, Geo has suggested that it be 10 years, but that's a negotiation. But how those buildings are owned impacts whether or not zoning is impacted or not. If the town owns the buildings, then there is less zoning restrictions. If the developer is going to own the buildings, then there are more zoning restrictions. So that's a negotiation. But I think, you know, that's one of the things that needs to be vetted through this period of the memorandum of understanding, is in terms of, you know, when we get to a point where if we have a lease, what does that look like?
Thank you, Mr. Rulli. Mr. Hanley, are you finished?
Yeah, that was my concern. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Kalenda.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening. Good evening, Gio. It's good to see you again. You know, I'll be real quick and brief. I'm pretty comfortable with the memorandum of understanding. I too also want to, you know, reiterate what the councilors are saying about the purchase. But, you know, Bob, you're 100% on point. It's part of the process and the negotiation. I can say that every time that Mr. Ciccone was before us at zoning, he was very transparent, very easy to work with. So I am anticipating the same process during this memorandum of understanding. So basically, Bob, go forward, good luck, and you have my blessing and my support.
Thank you, Councilman Kalenda. Yeah, I would say that this is seeming like a good start to a process. And I guess what I would, if the council does in fact agree to sign this memorandum of understanding, or give the manager the approval to sign, because it is for signature required, it would be really nice to have very regular updates on how your progress is going, and knowing where you're at pretty regularly throughout the time of the 6 months. Maybe you know, have monthly feedback, but at 6 months have some sort of idea of where you think you're going to be in the 7th, 8th to the 12th month, if that is required. Yeah, just having a lot of feedback along the way to know where you are without being overly intrusive on.
Yeah, no, Madam President, I think that we would be in a position to update you at the monthly council meetings.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that Gio and I are both anxious to get this moving forward, and that within 6 months, we're going to be able to give you a very clear view of where we're at.
That would be great. I have to ask, you would never, would it ever be your intention to solicit or enter into any sort of agreement with any sort of national chain or major known entity in either of those spaces?
I would not be comfortable with that.
I'm not asking you.
Oh, it's our final say, ma'am.
I know it is. I want to be sure that we have the same vision here.
Gio has that vision. I'm answering for him.
The thought had never crossed my mind until this second, for whatever that's worth.
Good answer.
Ms.
Good
Cronin, if I could,
Councilman Di Pasquale, speak.
it's refreshing listening to Mr. Ciccione because it brought back memories I had of our discussions with the council on this whole property over the years. And what I heard and what made me feel brought back my feeling of support was the way I would always say to the council, we don't want a developer going in here just putting in their vision. We want to say, we won't be able to apply for grants for private property. We want to have input. We want to have involvement. So hearing Mr. Ciccione say these things today, it made me remember the key aspects of our public-private partnership. And I also want to point out there were always council members who brought up the position of, do we want to own it? Do we want to be in a position? Why not let a developer down the road? So as we've heard today, we're at the table. Nothing can happen without our involvement. We have Kate, we have Bob, and we have the opportunity to look at what Mr. Ciccione decides to bring to the table, and we have the final say. So, you know, although I was in the beginning, I started off feeling just a little sluggish about the fact that we only had one bidder, I am confident in Mr. Giovanni Ciccione that he will move forward.
Well then, does anybody have any further questions for Mr. Ciccione? Hearing none, do we have a motion? How would we best word this motion, Mr. DeSisto?
I think what you need to do here is just to authorize the town council president to enter into the MOU agreement as presented.
So moved.
And the MOU specifically requests the signature of the town manager, not myself.
I'd be more comfortable if that was changed to the town council president.
If that's, so on this memorandum, the town of Warren will now be, will now have me in there instead of the manager.
Yes, motion to approve MOU with council president authorized to sign.
And I'll second that.
Vote, Councilman Di Pasquale,
Aye.
Councilman Heckert,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Congratulations, Mr. Ciccone.
Good luck, Gio.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Congratulations to the town of Warren.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. All right. One more and we're done. The last item on the agenda is request authorization to submit a grant application with the USDA Rural Development Community Facilities Program for a new senior center bus. Planner Rulli, give us the details here.
So we've been successful in the past. We've acquired police vehicles through the USDA Rural Development Program. We've received a dump truck for DPW. We were advised at the award ceremony for the dump truck that there was money available for the senior bus. We've had issues with the existing senior bus, and an application has been submitted to USDA Rural Development. They're ready to process it. The only thing we need is the council to approve us submitting that application.
Any questions from the council?
No.
Do we have a motion?
I will make a motion. We approve the authorization to submit a grant for the a new senior bus.
I'll second that.
Councilman Di Pasquale, your vote.
You're muted, Joe.
Aye.
Councilman Heckert,
Aye.
Councilman Hanley,
Aye.
Councilman Kalenda.
Aye.
Aye for myself. The motion passes. Get that grant, buy that bus. I will entertain a motion to adjourn after I say, please, everybody, be safe, be well, wear your masks, do your best to keep your distance until this thing is over.
Motion
And
to adjourn.
we won't be seeing it back. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, just say
Aye.
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 Good night, everybody. Stay strong, stay safe.
Aye.
See you
My
later.
camera's dead.
Bye-bye.